A traumatic or abusive relationship is very hard to overcome mentally and emotionally. Welcome to another episode of the Mental Health Break. Joelle Maletis, a trauma specialist, joins me today to talk about the trauma that impacts women after an abusive or toxic relationship. Hi, I'm Dr. Nafisa Sekandari, a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety-based disorders. I created the Mental Health Break podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you prioritize your mental health. Mental illness can cost you time and money. Ignoring your symptoms will only make the problems worse. Taking time out of your busy day to dedicate to improving your mental health can lead to long-term health and wellness. In this podcast, each week you'll learn tips, tricks, and proven strategies to help you regain control of your life, all while prioritizing your mental health. If you want to improve your life, regain control of your mental health, and feel empowered, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by the Transforming Anxiety course, an online, self-paced anxiety course to help you manage and control your anxiety from the comfort, privacy, and convenience of your own home. Learn how to transform your anxiety in just 6 short weeks. Course registration is now open. To learn more, visit transforminganxiety.com/course. I'm so excited to talk to Joelle Maletis about the trauma related to relationships and how they impact women. Let me briefly introduce her before I bring her on. Joelle Maletis is a licensed marriage and family therapist who incorporated CBT and DBT skills, somatic work, EMDR, along with talk therapy, and solution-focused therapy to provide a structure that allows clients to make changes in their own lives. By offering a safe space, Joelle works with a diverse clientele that includes C-suite executives, content moderators, active and retired military personnel, first responders, police and law enforcement, and those experiencing various forms of trauma, PTSD, and post-traumatic growth. Joelle has appeared in several TED Talks, as well as ABC's 60 Minutes Beyond the Headlines. Joelle is also a published author, among her many other accomplishments. Hi, Joelle. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk again. I know we've done this once before, so this will be great.
Yeah, I just shared a little bit about your very impressive background, but like you said, I was so impressed with your background and with your knowledge and awareness that you're the only guest that has come back twice on this podcast. So that's pretty impressive.
Well, thanks so much. We had so much fun. I know we probably could have talked for 5 hours about this stuff easily. So I'm really excited to be back and have been looking forward to it. And we've gotten such a great response from our listeners as well. So
well, trauma is such a huge topic. And the last time we really dove into understanding trauma and the different treatment options that are available. So of course it makes sense for us to dig a little bit deeper this time, right?
Yeah. Especially, I think when we talked too, we were in, I don't want to say the beginning phases of the global pandemic, but in a lot of ways we had no idea what we were in for. And so now we're, if you can believe it, still there. And the trauma and vicarious trauma, secondary trauma that people are experiencing just from that alone, I think is definitely different from when we talked last, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to get worse, unfortunately, because people are having these experiences and they're saying anxiety is going to be the next pandemic, or mental health and mental illness overall is going to be the next pandemic. It's definitely been on the rise anyway. And this is pushing everybody over the edge. So I'm glad that you're doing the work that you're doing and educating and teaching people. And so thank you for being here and having this, continuing the conversation, I guess.
Yeah.
Today we wanted to talk about relationships and women. And I just finished doing a whole marriage series recently for the Muslim community, and then educating them about the steps to take to avoid abusive relationships and create long-term relationships. But it's not just the Muslim community. It's all my patients, regardless of what their background is, once they get involved in a very toxic relationship, that trauma is lingering. It's very difficult for them to trust again. It's very difficult for them to move forward and have a healthy relationship. So can you talk a little bit about that and just what are the reasons that women get into these relationships, and then what are some symptoms that you notice once they are out of a relationship like this? How is this impacting them, and how does the trauma affect their lives?
Yeah, there's such good questions. And I think, I'm sure with your clients as well, right? There's this difficulty of, this is not the person I thought it was, right? And now what do I do? And it takes women so long to leave relationships. So how they get into them is a good question. I think sometimes it's the trauma cycle, and it's so much easier to do something that I know and that I'm familiar with. And I know that sounds strange or counterintuitive, but so many times women get into relationship patterns and they keep falling for the same kind of person. And that could be, mom, it could be dad. That's the way we used to think about it. I think more in a traditional and Western sense of psychology. And now it's, it could be anybody that maybe feels comfortable, and sometimes that comfort isn't necessarily positive. So somebody who's been abused as a child may seek out relationships that are similar because it's familiar. The unknown is way more scary. So I think that sometimes people get into relationships with personality types that they feel comfortable with, even if they know that that's not good for them or it's toxic. I think other women get into relationships and it goes sideways on them, and then they don't know how to get out, or they can't get out. They financially can't. You talked about religion, from a religious perspective, that goes against their ideology. Sometimes they have children and no other way to support children. And then depending where they live in the world, what those rules and social norms are. And so getting out of those kinds of toxic relationships are equally as difficult. And then, what do we see afterwards? Well, it used to be that the statistic for women was it took about, on average, so it's an old statistic and it's an average, 7 times for women to finally leave an abusive relationship. They leave, they come back, they leave, they come back. And so I think what happens when they get out of really toxic relationships, whether it's abuse in the more traditional physical and emotional abuse, or if it's abuse in something that's financial abuse. Gaslighting is been a term that people are using a lot these days when it comes to toxic relationships. And then they don't know who to trust. And so the biggest thing is they don't trust themselves, they don't trust the world, they don't trust other people. And then there's that anger. I'm angry at myself and I'm angry at this other person. And so I think, that's what we start to see when women are coming out of relationships.
I mean, relationships are difficult as they are, and especially now with the pandemic. Just even dating, just even online dating has completely shifted how people get into relationships. And of course, online, people can be anybody they want to be. That doesn't necessarily mean who they are, and it's very easy to fall for that facade, for that illusion. And narcissistic abuse is definitely real, and a lot of, like you said, these people are comfortable with this type of person. I think the word familiar might be better, because a lot of them are like, I'm not comfortable. I don't want to attract the abusive mother that I had or the abusive father that I had. But yet it's so familiar at the subconscious level that they beeline for that person because they understand that. And I think that's what you meant when you said comfortable. They understand that pattern, and going against that is so foreign that that's scary. Like, I literally had this one person tell us that the nice guys are boring. Mm-hmm. And so they're drawn to the drama and the chaos. And how would you recommend that these people break that pattern? Because it is so psychologically deeply ingrained, and it's at the subconscious level. How do people break that so that they don't continue to fall into these horrible, toxic, traumatic relationships?
Yeah. I mean, so, we always start with talk therapy, right? Especially, who you work with and who I work with, we tend to go there first. There's all different kinds of therapies. There, somatic therapies or body therapies, and breaking that subconscious. I love the way you say that. The reason I say comfortable, and let me try and do a better job of explaining what I mean. I love how you talked about the subconscious piece, right? We are absolutely familiar. We recognize these things. We don't necessarily understand why. Comfort in the body, and a lot of times feelings that are familiar and repetitive bring us comfort. And so our anxiety actually spikes if we don't know what's going on and we don't feel like we can control it. And when we talk about toxic relationships and breaking the cycle of being in toxic relationships, a lot of the times it's being back in the body and trying to figure out what's okay with me, what's not okay, what am I comfortable with, what am I uncomfortable with. And so I think for me, this idea of familiarity and comfort are commingled, right? And that's not necessarily a positive thing. So when you're asking, how do we break that cycle? So much of it is making it conscious. What are we responding to emotionally? What are we physically responding to? What are our thoughts telling us? How do we cognitively work with our thoughts? Can we stop our thoughts and move forward? Can we say, here are these flags. And in the past, I used to just say, I don't know if it matters. And now I'm looking at it saying, well, maybe this is something I should be paying attention to, right? This person's exciting. They feel comfortable. That quote, nice guys are boring, I think you mentioned, right? That's not exciting. And I'm used to being stimulated all the time, and that's what happens with toxic relationships, is that we're stimulated negatively and positively all the time. So that calm can be anxiety provoking.
It's also uncertainty. Our brain doesn't like uncertainty, especially if we have a history of trauma and anxiety.
Right.
And so we want consistency, or we want familiarity for our body to relax. Unfortunately, what's familiar is the toxicity, the drama, the chaos.
Yeah.
And so I've had friends that have said, you can fill a stadium full of really nice guys and I will beeline and find that horrible toxic person.
Yeah, it comes back to that first question you asked, like why? Like why do we do that? And why do women do that? And what I've been really interested in is these trauma responses, and there's more people talking about trauma responses. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry. And that ends up being a trauma response, right? Or finding the one person, that one guy in the crowd, right? And you're like, be a bunch of really nice people and I'll find the one, one undesirable person. And that's the one I want to start a relationship, right? Like we get into these cycles as women, and the trauma component is, well, it's exciting. Oh, well, this person's going to be different. I think some of it is that nature versus nurture. We want as women to nurture, and we want to have relationships that are nurturing, and we fall into patterns of, well, I'll just mother you. I'll mother you and you'll change, right? And I think all of those things are trauma responses too.
I'll fix you. Yeah, I can fix you. And then they believe when this toxic person blames all of his exes as being crazy, but you're different. You're special. That's where the love bombing comes in. That's where the gaslighting comes in. That's where they tell you you're the only one that matters right now. And then you believe it. It's like, of course, I'm the one that's going to fix this person.
Yeah. And I don't think that that's quote narcissistic, end quote, right? Like on women who are in relationships like that, or fall for people like that.
That's what I mean. It's the people they fall for, not that they're the ones.
Right. And so it's this, oh, I'm special. Oh, we all, that makes us feel good, right? And I want to be special. I want the person that I'm with to choose me. Right. And I want to be wanted, and I want to be needed. And it makes me feel good when all of these things happen. So here you have somebody that's, oh, you're the only one, or you're the one that's going to fix it. Well, you're the only one that gets me. I'll change for you, honey. I love you so much. Right. Like you name it. And that level of manipulation it's on a whole nother level of manipulation. Right. And so women come out of these relationships, and it's like, not only do I not trust men, right, or people, I don't trust myself. I don't trust myself to make good decisions.
And it leads to that because you've been burned so much that you don't trust yourself anymore. Yeah. And so you end up making bad decisions, or this is better than nothing. I'd rather be with somebody like this than be alone.
Yeah.
That's more painful.
Right. And I think all of that comes from trauma. And if somebody didn't have trauma before that kind of relationship, they probably have some sort of trauma after that kind of relationship, right?
The thing that happens when we talk about just even narcissistic relationships is initially they will pursue you. You become a victim, you become groomed for these people as a target, and then they pursue you relentlessly, and they do the love bombing, they make you feel so special. Everybody else is awful compared to you, and so you get so used to that level of attention, not realizing that as soon as they get you, they become distant, they become emotionally unavailable. So then you're constantly trying to go back to that level. I mean, no drug is more powerful than love, right? And we think we're in love with these kind of people. And so that's what I really was interested in having this conversation with you being the trauma expert, because a lot of women don't realize how a relationship like this can have long-term effects. I mean, just from the divorce perspective, like you said, once you're in it, you might not be able to get out.
Right.
5 to 7 times, maybe even 5 to 7 years before you even realize you're in a relationship like this.
Yeah. And what does that mean? Yeah. What does that mean for me in all of my other relationships? Right. And platonic relationships. So if I'm in a romantic relationship like that, chances are I'm being cut off from my friends and family, right? Because that happens often. It's all about control and attention. I want 100% of your attention 100% of the time. And so if you're not giving it to me, then I become abusive. And like you said, an abuse can be like that emotional withdrawal. I'm going to withhold love from you. I'm going to withhold sex from you. I'm going to withhold money from you. I'm going to withhold attention and friends. Right. So that's abuse. It doesn't mean that somebody is experiencing physical abuse in their relationship, right? To have an abusive relationship. So I think women don't know how to define it either.
Exactly. Unless I'm being physically punched, then I'm not in an abusive relationship, right. Not realizing that the name calling, the put downs, the making you feel inferior, the social isolation. I mean, the best way to control you is to completely isolate you from your social support and from your friends and family. But also, can you talk about the domestic violence cycle? Because that directly ties into this, where a lot of women don't realize that they're in that cycle of abuse and then apology and love. I mean, just all of that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's what we've been talking about. So just to put names to everything we've talked about thus far, right, is it starts with, I love you more than anything, you're the only one that gets me. And it's a very intense beginning to a relationship. It doesn't always have to be a super fast beginning to a relationship, but typically they are. It's very passionate emotionally and physically. It's very intense with all the feels. There's lots of gifts. There's lots of flattery, meet my family, meet my friends. And so they start off with these very intense relationships. And then once you're committed to the person, and the true colors start to show, it starts with anger and hostility. And so the anger and hostility and the rage sets in, and then the fights start there, right? And after the fight, and it could be everything from name calling, like you said, it doesn't have to be somebody who's being physically punched, or someone throwing, I've heard lots of stories, right? And somebody having things thrown at them or holes punched in the wall. It doesn't have to be that. It can be name calling and saying very vicious things, even threatening divorce, right? In an argument, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to divorce you. I'm going to take everything from you. You're crazy. I'm going to, 5150 you. I'm going to put you in the hospital and take away the kids. I've heard all sorts of things, right? And then after the dust settles from that, and the person realizes their bad behavior, and I'll put that in air quotes, right? Bad behavior. The apologies start, and I'm so sorry, it'll never happen again. I'll get help. I'll go to therapy. I love you more than anything. There's a lot of gift giving. There's a lot of passion that comes back in. And this mental gymnastics that women do, well, he's changed. Well, it's not going to happen again. Well, he said he's sorry. He's never going to do it again. And so there's this cycle of of relaxation in the relationship that happens, and then connection. And again, I know that sounds strange to hear it that way, but there's this reconnection that happens after abuse. And then there's the ramping up. The person's on edge again. They're getting agitated again. Women report they feel like they're walking on eggshells because there's this pre-contemplation, post-contemplation component to it. So pre-contemplation, I'm not sure I'm angry, and I'm not sure what he's going to do. And then the incident happens. Post-contemplation, maybe I'm going to leave. He tells me he's so sorry, he loves me. And then there's that passion, and I'm back in it. So it's this constant cycle of, it's bad, it's amazing, it starts to get bad, I'm walking on eggshells, and I'm bracing for it. Okay, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. The thing happens again, it's bad again, and we're back in this, but I love you more than anything, I'll change. And so it's cyclical.
It's a horrible cycle, and people joke about how they get addicted to the makeup sex, right?
Yeah.
And then or making up, they get addicted to that chaos. They get addicted to just that whole arguing, and then they consider that to be passion. And
Right.
So it's really, and so a lot of people are like, well, there's no way I would fall for a relationship like that. I'm too smart. And that's the thing that's so sad about this. I've known people that were psychologists. I've known people that are smart and beautiful. And I mean, just when you hear about Halle Berry, considered one of the most beautiful women, how she keeps getting into one abusive relationship after another. And to the point that she, I think, has hearing loss from a guy hitting her so hard that she ended up losing her hearing. And so it has nothing to do with whether you're smart or you're beautiful. We're all victims of this. And so for this reason, I need to just really emphasize how devastating this is because of the effects it can have. So can you talk a little bit about the trauma and what that looks like and how that will affect them moving forward in their lives?
Yeah, it's sad. And when you say, I thought I was so smart, I thought I could have recognized this, I thought I was better than this, I think we forget that, we fall in love, and those are big emotions physically too. Like you said, there's a biochemistry component, and pain and pleasure actually run in the same neurotransmitting center of our brain. And so, there's all of this biochemistry that's behind why we make choices, especially in love relationships and that intensity. And so, it feels good, and we want to believe our partner. We want to believe that we're being told the truth, right? And they're not lying, and they will change, and they do love us as much as we love that, right? We believe all of this stuff. And so the trauma piece puts us in these states where we no longer can trust our own judgment. And so we start to question our own values. We question our own belief. We question our intelligence. Are we really smart? Can we really make good decisions? And then we also don't necessarily trust the people that were already in relationship then. And so, it impacts our everyday living. Then trying to get into a new relationship, right? Women tend to cut off good relationships and healthy relationships because they don't know what they want, and it doesn't feel the same. Like you said, you use the analogy with some of your friends where, there could be a stadium full of really nice guys, and I'll pick out the one not great one, or, the one troublemaker, the one jerk, right? And it's like, yeah, we start to cut off relationships because, they're too nice right now, something bad's going to happen, I better get out. And so we stop, having the ability to trust the executive part of our functioning. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing. Women have identity issues, they have sexual functioning issues, their self-esteem is completely tanked. They don't believe in themselves, which is, I think, worse in a lot of times. It's not that I don't believe in somebody else, but I don't even believe in myself. I don't have any value or worth. I'm only worth, my value is only, because I provide sex, or I'm pretty, or, whatever it is, whatever this false narrative that women tell themselves to be able to tolerate the abusive relationship.
And I also want to say, I know we're talking about women and trauma, but obviously men can be in abusive relationships as well. Absolutely. And men can be in a narcissistic relationship with women that are narcissists. It's not just that the men are. So I want to really be clear about that. Just as right now we're talking about women and the trauma that it causes, and then how hard it is to get over that. Because like you said here, a lot of them are attracted to men that are abusive and in these traumatic relationships because of the homes that they grew up in. So what are some steps that you would recommend for women to avoid something like this? Because if that's the familiar, if that's their foundation is trauma and chaos, how is it possible, first of all, for them to have healthy relationships moving forward? And then what are some steps that you would recommend that they take?
Yeah, I think, absolutely healthy relationships. And so, and I appreciate you bringing in that, we are specifically talking about women, and we're not necessarily even talking about women with all different types of relationships. We're really talking about, from a hetero, women who are straight and in relationships with men. Just interestingly enough, women who are in relationships with other women, the cycle is very similar. Women who are the abusers and men are in relationship with women or with men who are abusers, the cycle is very similar, and the symptoms are similar. There's a few nuanced differences, but it's not that people are interchangeable. I don't mean it that way, but we are just specifically talking about male-female or female-male relationships. So yes, women can absolutely have healthy relationships, and I always joke and say it starts with therapy. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. However, there are great resources out there. There are podcasts, and like this one, there are books, there are workbooks. You can take free classes on masterclass. There's all sorts of things to how do I work on my self-esteem? What do I want in a partner? And so, my clients always tease me and say, oh, Joelle's going to tell me to make a list, because I always tell people, all right, let's just start with the list. And, give me the laundry list. What do you want, in a partner? Let's start there. Give me the laundry list. And it's funny because people will, when they haven't had an abusive relationship or they're getting out of an abusive relationship, they are not focused on, he needs to be X, feet tall, or he needs to look like this, or he needs to have, they really start with, I want somebody who listens to me. I want someone who's going to validate what I say, who's going to say nice things to me, who doesn't call me the B word every time they get angry with me. So women will start with what they don't want. I don't want to be abused the way I was. And so part of it is getting it out of the subconscious. So when we make a list and we're like, all right, let's write down the laundry list. What do you want in a partner? Women can start to see that, oh, does this person meet these things that I've listed out? I always joke and tell my clients, I'm like, you want to go out and share a meal with somebody, and they don't have to pay. Whatever they can, you can, it doesn't matter. You want to be in a public place because you actually want to see how this person treats other people. How do they treat other women, right? How do they talk about their past relationships? These are all clues as far as what is this person thinking? And so starting with, can we look at relationships differently?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, like you said, a lot of them hope that they never, or their language is, I don't want this and this and this.
Right.
I'm a big believer in the law of attraction and how we attract whatever we focus on. And if I'm constantly focusing on avoiding abuse, that's what I'm going to get more of. So focus, change the way you talk to yourself. Focus on, maybe you're not comfortable with a good guy right now. Maybe the bad boy still catches your eye, but start changing that internal dialogue and say, no, I want stability. I want somebody that's emotionally stable, mentally stable, somebody that's generous, somebody that's kind. Start planting those seeds in your mind so that your reticular activating system starts working and starts finding those people for you, instead of, ooh, I like the bad boy. I like the one that makes me feel all nervous and excited with butterflies in my stomach. That's not love. That could be anxiety. That could be anything but love. But yet that's what you're so used to you beeline forward, like you said, the familiar, the comfortable, the thing that you recognize as something that you've seen before. So you have to change the programming at the subconscious level. I don't know how you feel about affirmations, but I feel that that's something that we need to start saying, like, maybe I am good enough. Maybe I am worthy of love that's stable. Initially, you might be like, no, I'm not. I'm damaged. I'm not good at this. And I'm the one that's at fault for making these relationships not work. Whatever your mind starts coming up with.
Yeah.
But after saying these things in the present context, in the present moment, for 30 days, your brain starts to believe that. And then you start changing what you look for.
Yeah. And I love how you bring that in. And, that's the biggest way to change the subconscious is, that people will start with the negative. I don't want these things. Okay. Well, like you said, tell me what you do want. I want to go back to this idea of the bad boy. And it's really an interesting concept to me, especially studying trauma, because I think one can have it all. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of really nice guys out there who are stable, who have great jobs, who ride a motorcycle, right? Like, who wear a leather jacket, who play a guitar on a Friday night in a band, right? Like, so getting also out of this paradigm of, bad boy means I'm treated badly. No, maybe, but somebody who's exciting and passionate and risk-taking and stable and kind and like we can have it all. And I think as women, we don't think that. We put ourselves in these situations. We fall prey to the paradigm. Social media is all about people can create whatever image they want. And so how do we find someone who gives us everything that we want, right? And so I always say, I want to be needed, right? Not because I need to fix you, right? Or need to, I don't want that. I don't want somebody that I have to parent. That doesn't make for a healthy relationship at all. I don't want to be parented. It may feel nice in the beginning, right? But I don't want somebody who parents me because that's controlling, and that's not a healthy relationship. So, but I want somebody who needs me. They need my company, and they need our relationship in a healthy way, right? So we're interdependent, not codependent. I want somebody who wants me. I want to be with you. You're my person. So I want to be needed in an interdependent, not codependent way. I want to be wanted. I want to be with you, and I want to be chosen. I choose to continue to be with you every day. I wake up and I choose this relationship, right? Because it's the right relationship for me. Not perfect. It's not perfect, but it's the right one. And I want to go to bed at night and say, you know what? I choose to be with you. And that doesn't mean we had a good day. Maybe we're fighting. Maybe we've had some unhappy times, or we've been stuck in the house for 15 months together with COVID, like you name it, So being happy as a state of being, not just an emotion. I'm happy even though we're having some hard times is very different than I'm happy and when you're angry, you abuse me.
Right.
That's a really different paradigm.
Right. And I want to define the whole bad boy. Yeah, you can have tattoos, you can wear a leather jacket, you can be a biker guy. That's not what I mean when I say bad guy. I'm talking about the guy that treats you as if you're just a side opportunity, that you can take you or leave you. He is not consistent and reliable. Specializing in anxiety, what I know people need from relationships, and maybe this is because the majority of my patients have anxiety, is that I tell all of them what they need is somebody that's consistent and reliable. I've met a lot of guys that come in the office that can look very intimidating. They're very big, they have tattoos, they might be bald, and they might have their leather jacket, and they might even carry weapons. Sweetest guys I've ever met. That doesn't mean that they're the ones that I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the guy that mistreats you, that treats you really, really badly, and you fall for that because you feel like that's what a relationship should be. It should be that I'm going to pull away and I'm going to come back, and we're going to come back together passionately, and then I'm going to pull away again. And that's what people get addicted to.
I absolutely agree. And I hear a lot of, he looks so nice. He was so put together. He's got this great job. Well, he may have he makes X figures. He went to this school, and it's like, yeah. And he treats you terribly. The anxiety piece, I think it can be there as a standalone. It doesn't have to be a result of trauma. For many people, it is not. Sometimes it predates the trauma, and so people they've had anxiety and they have a history of anxiety. And so even just consistency of this person is going to take me out for dinner or take me places, or we're going to spend time together every Friday and Saturday night. When somebody who's anxious, that predictability helps, right? And having that predictability does not mean that's a bad relationship. That's not what I'm insinuating. When we talk about what happens after these relationships, somebody develops anxiety. And if they had it pre-relationship, their anxiety's through the roof now. And now that fight, flight, freeze is constantly in motion. They're hypervigilant. Their cortisol is through the roof all the time. And so I feel anxious all the time now. And that's times 10 when I'm in relationships. So anxiety and trauma are so interwoven and symptomatically, right? Sometimes it feels the same. So I love how when you say I work with anxiety, and then you're talking about these kinds of toxic relationships. Yeah, now we're adding post-traumatic stress. Maybe not post-traumatic stress disorder, but absolutely post-traumatic stress and dissociation, fight, flight, freeze, hypervigilance. We're adding that now into the mix of somebody who may be struggling with anxiety to begin with, on a good day. So part of this bad person for me is they fuel the anxiety. Well, I'll just leave you. Well, that's fine. I don't need you. There's so many other, I can get better than you. You need me. You're never going to be loved the way I love you. Right. And that fuels that what's already there with anxiety, that taps right into that, I'm never going to be loved again component.
Yeah. And you don't realize that you don't want to be loved like this ever again, because this is not healthy love. But that consistency and reliability, that doesn't feel exciting. I mean, I know for my brain, I have an over anxious brain. If you are consistent with me and you're reliable and I can count on you, if you say you're going to be there at 10 o'clock and the next day you show up, or you say you're going to bring something and the next time I see you, you bring it, that makes me trust you, because people with anxiety already have trust issues. And somebody that can be consistent and reliable is really, really important to calm down that over anxious part of our brain. And then these people that are consistent and reliable might not trigger that butterfly feeling in your stomach. You might not get that excitement, but that's exactly who you probably need to be with, because that excitement and the butterfly isn't necessarily the recipe for a healthy love relationship. And it might slowly unfold. And so that's something that for a lot of people, they equate that anxiety with, he's playing games with me, or he's not calling back, he's not texting when he says he's supposed to. I'm going to change that. I'm going to be more. I'm going to dress nicer. I'm going to talk nicer. I'm going to wear different clothes just to get that attention, realizing it was never about you. This is how they are for everyone.
Right. And, I love that you identify the butterflies, right? That's what we think. I think it's what we've been socialized to believe. Oh, this is what love is you get you get butterflies. So when I have clients coming in who have had very traumatic relationships, or they're in traumatic relationships, or the beginnings of just anywhere on that continuum, right? We spend time talking about how can you differentiate, because getting butterflies from somebody, and that is the thing that tells me I'm in love, is very different than I'm in love with a really great person, right? And I get butterflies sometimes. Sometimes I get nervous. Sometimes I feel anxious. I have a very stable relationship, and yet I still feel anxious. Okay, let's work with that. So, when you talk about what are things that women need to do get out of these patterns and get out of their subconscious. You mentioned, Halle Berry, right? It's starting to work with what are the physical or the somatic symptoms that you're getting when you meet somebody and you're like, oh, this may be the guy. And after a month, you're like, this may be the guy, and he's treating you terribly, right? And I know a month seems like people are like, oh, it's such a short time. Well, remember, these kinds of relationships are fast-tracked. And so you've probably spent, hours and hours and hours texting and talking and meeting and getting together. And what does that make you feel, right? What happens when you say, hey, I really can't talk tonight. I've got an early morning, right? Do you get this, oh, of course, honey, no problem. Good luck. I hope you do great. Let me know how it goes response. Or do you get the, oh, no, I just need 10 more minutes. Oh, well, why are you leaving me? Well, why can't you just do it tomorrow? Well, why can't,
Right.
So it's recognizing all of those things. And then, like you said, that anxiety reaction, how are we feeling in our body with it?
And you're right, with the online and the texting, a relationship that used to probably unfold in 3 months can unfold in a month, really like go way beyond that time, because we are in contact a lot more, but also not asking the right questions and really falling too quickly without really being aware of what you're getting yourself into. So if somebody is in a relationship like that, where they're kind of finally were able to get out of a relationship that was toxic, what forms of treatment, I guess, would you recommend for them in order to start working on putting their lives back together and then hopefully attracting healthier partners moving forward?
Yeah, that's such a hard question. I think it depends on what is the trauma, what kind of trauma, how long was the relationship, what do they actually need, what support do they need? And so for me specifically, being trauma informed and my clinicians being trauma informed, and then also being client centered. And so what does that mean? It's we work very hard and we have a lot of training on how not to re-traumatize clients when they're coming to us and they're talking about trauma. And then also that we're tailor making a therapy program for each client that's going to work for them. So for some clients, it is journaling and it is meditation and mindfulness and being comfortable, getting back into the body. For some women, that's really working on being comfortable with sex. And what is, there's books, there's specialists, there's all sorts of different tools and techniques for women to work on how they feel in their body and how they show up in relationships with sex. And so it can be anything from EMDR, which is very specific for trauma work, to skills-based CBT and thought-stopping skills-based stuff, or some kind of a mindfulness training to work on that. For other people, it could also be medication for depression and anxiety. And typically, again, since we're talking about women, typically women coming out of very toxic relationships do report they feel damaged. They feel damaged and they feel broken. And so maybe their depression and their anxiety is really, really difficult for them to manage. And so sometimes medication is used to help with that, to get them moving forward. So I think it's just, there's a lot of different things, and it's really hard to find the support that you need when you're in or getting out of a relationship. You've probably burned out your friends because you've been talking about it and complaining, and your friends don't want to hear it anymore. And your family doesn't want to hear it anymore. And maybe they don't want you to leave for whatever agenda that they have for you or for that person. So having support, having a healthy outlet, reconnecting with people that you trust, therapy, maybe even some medication. There's all different kinds of things I think that people can do to get the help that they need.
Well, yeah, you did mention a couple. It's true. It's a comprehensive process as far as getting better again, because you have to kind of put yourself back together. And I think it starts with self-care and really making sure you're taking care of yourself, you're sleeping well, you're eating well, taking your vitamins and supplements, and then talking to a mental health professional that you feel safe, because like you said, a lot of times we think we have friends and family we can talk to, but they're so close to the situation, they may not be able to give us the feedback, the objective feedback that we need. And so talking to a trained mental health professional that you feel connected to, because at the end of the day, I mean, they've done so much research as to who should you go talk to when it comes to mental health professionals. It really doesn't matter as far as like training so much as it does. I mean, obviously training is important, but it really matters how you feel when you're talking to them. If you feel comfortable with them and you trust them and you have a connection with them, then you're more likely to take their advice and actually feel supported, right? And so you mentioned EMDR, which I love for trauma, and I know you use that a lot for trauma. There's tapping, there's talk therapy, there's cognitive behavior therapy to kind of help you change the negative self-talk that's going on with you, blaming yourself, thinking that you're the damaged one, you're the problem. All of that can go a long way in helping you change the way you see the situation.
Absolutely. And I know we talked about this on the, the first time we connected. I think even before we recorded the first podcast, and you and I absolutely are on the same page, where there's a lot of amazing clinicians out there, whether it's a counselor, a therapist, a social worker, psychologist. There's a lot of really great people out there, and there's a lot of terrible ones. And so if you meet a therapist or a mental health provider that you don't like, find someone else. Don't be shy about interviewing them. Hey, do you work with people who are in toxic relationships or who are in abusive relationships? Or have you worked with women who are getting out of relationships? And if they say, oh yeah, that's kind of what I do, and you believe it, cool. If you don't, go on, move on. There are so many great providers out there. And that connection is absolutely the change. Self-care. And I agree with you. It absolutely starts with self-care. That's typically not what I see when people are coming into my office. They're not sleeping. They're not eating. They're not socializing.
Self-care.
It's the opposite, right? And so, a lot of times, doing the work in therapy for a while before I can even get to, hey, are you sleeping a little bit more? Are you, and that again, those are trauma responses. I don't need to take care of myself because I'm not worth it. And if I'm not worth it, then why would I do that? And that's not a conscious thought. I think I hope the listeners out there are picking up on the level of programming and grooming, as you said, and subconscious material that's humming in the background all the time, right? And so, I didn't sleep well, I didn't eat well, I forgot to, I didn't work out, I didn't meet my friends, I didn't feel like it, I blew them off, I'm isolated, I'm depressed, I'm watching, 8 hours of Netflix every day. I mean, people get into these cycles that they cannot break. And so the self-care part is so hard sometimes. And it is a huge piece of getting
wallowing in it is easier than actually getting up and exercising. Wallowing in it and having a tub of ice cream is a lot easier than actually making better food choices. So yes, right. But that's something. If somebody's going through this situation right now, and you're sitting on that couch watching hours of Netflix, turn it off and go for a walk and see how you feel. Start off your morning in a very calm and slow way and see how you feel. Start journaling. Start dumping a lot of that rage and anger in your journal and go off on this person so that all that energy that's inside of you gets diffused. Start there. And then call a friend. Go hang out with your friends. Rebuild your social connection again, because all of that is really, really important. I was going to ask you, have you seen this movie on Netflix called Good on Paper?
I have seen it. I really like the comedian that does that movie, but it's a great one.
It's a great movie for women and she kind of talks about that, how we get so excited of how they look good on paper, how they check all the boxes, they have the right job, they wear the right clothes, they have the right position or status or title, they make the right amount of money. not realizing they're horrible people. Or they could be faking all of it, but we question ourselves because in this movie, I think she initially doesn't even like this person, but then she starts doubting herself and questioning, like, well, maybe I should like him because he meets all the boxes, he checks out, and not realizing. I mean, everybody should watch that movie because it's based on a true story. I mean, it really happened to her, and I think the way she presents it in a comedic way is a good way to send the message of why we need to listen to our gut, pay attention to ourselves, and not focus on just how they look on paper alone.
Right. Absolutely. And, journaling is everyone can start it right now. When you're done listening to this podcast, take a piece of paper and write, what I want, what do I need, and what I desire. And so I think journaling, it's like, oh, I've got to sit down and try and figure out how to free write or, for 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be that hard, right? What do I want? What do I need? What do I desire? What am I deserving of? When you talked about, this law of attraction. And so writing those things down, putting them, I have sticky notes. If you could actually see my desk, you'd laugh. I have sticky notes and papers. And it's like, when I was going through grad school, I was also going through a really tough time. I had a 1 and 3-year-old. I was, going through a divorce, and it was rough. And I had a big sign that I had made in class that said perfectly imperfect. And I know that sounds a little trite, but I am a ballerina by training. I did that for 22 years. Perfectionism is not only an anxiety response, it's a learned response, but it also is a trauma response, ladies. So all of you, type A perfectionists, that can be a trauma response. And so, from my own stuff, I had these affirmations. I wrote them on my bathroom mirror, and quotes that I loved. And I, still do that. And I pin those up, and it just hoping that that'll bleed into my subconscious a little bit. Right. And can keep cultivating that mindset of, it's okay. Right. So I give myself, hey, okay, I know I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, but I am a perfectionist. And so I say, okay, you're allowed to make as many mistakes as you want, but you have to make 3 a day. So I set myself up for success. All right, you got to make 3 mistakes a day. Otherwise, you're not in it. You're not present then.
And anxiety runs in my family, so that need for perfectionism also runs in my family. And with my daughter, I really encouraged her to make mistakes. I didn't want her to have this belief that everything had to be perfect, because mistakes can be our best teachers. Even these horrible relationships we get into, and we get out of it, and we're blessed enough to get out of it, we can look back and say, what did it teach me? And I think that's a good way to process the trauma, is what can we get one thing out of it that was a really important lesson for us, that strengthened us as a person, that made us realize that we're capable of more, we want more, we need more. And so that can be a good way for you to make sense of what happened. It's like, okay, the only way you're going to stop making those mistakes is acknowledge that it was a mistake, acknowledge what lesson you learned. Otherwise, you're just going to keep repeating the same thing until you learn your lessons. But you mentioned journaling as far as what you want. It doesn't have to be these deep, long journaling sessions. You can just start writing down. And as far as going back to the movie Good on Paper, start writing down and then prioritizing what is important to you in a relationship. If it is a degree, if those are the top, the degree, the job, the money, then you're looking for somebody that looks good on paper, instead of looking for somebody that's kind, that's generous, that's loving, that's generous with their love towards you. It's not generous with money. It's generous with their time, generous with their love, generous with their affection. Those emotionally available, those are things that should be top on your priority list, instead of makes a certain amount of money, has a certain degree, looks really good in a suit, good arm candy. So those are things you can put in not only in your journal, but you can do a vision board and add those things on your vision board as well.
Right. And like I joked earlier, start with a list. What are the things that I want? What are the things that I don't want? And what are the things that I am not willing to tolerate? I'm not willing to tolerate somebody who's going to put their hands on me in an abusive, a mean, aggressive way without consent. That's not somebody that I want. Right. write it down, because it helps give you clarity as far as how do I find the relationship that's going to work for me. And the positive piece of, without being, quote, toxically positive, the positive piece of, I deserve to be with somebody who's going to treat me with respect, who's going to give me love and attention, and again, not 100% of the time, because that's a codependent relationship and we don't want those, right? This idea of interdependency. And just, I always want to choose people and not, even platonic relationships. I went through a period of my life where I cut out anything I decided that was toxic for me. And it didn't mean that they were toxic people. Some of them were very lovely. But if the relationship was toxic for me, I didn't want it anymore. I didn't have time and the energy and the desire to be in toxic relationships. And that was a very painful experience for me to have to cut people out of my life, some of which had been in my life for a long time. I am so much happier. The people that are in my life give me what I give them. I'm not the one that calls them every single time. They call me too, right? And it's this give and take. And so some of it is journal about that piece, right? Like, what do you actually want? It's like, well, I want somebody who's going to give me what I give them. So if I'm yelling at them, I'm probably going to get back what I'm giving, right? If I'm calling names, I'm probably going to get back what I'm giving, right? If I show love with time, do I receive love that way? Do I want somebody's time? So many women are like, well, he gave me this thing, right? But is that really how you receive love? Or do you receive love because he wrote you a letter instead? Or he took out the garbage every Monday night because garbage day is Tuesday, and he just does, and you never have to ask, and that makes you feel loved. We receive love in so many different ways, and doesn't match always the way we give love. So how do I want to feel loved? How do I
knowing your love language, right?
Yeah.
What is it because your love language might be completely different than your partner's love language, and if if acts of service is something that means something to you, then that's what you're going to want to put down on your little list of things that you want. I want somebody that does things for me without having to be told a million times. I want somebody to empty the dishwasher or bring me coffee or write me a note. Those are things that are important to you. Put that on there. But also, I'm a big believer in order for us to know what we like, we should give it to ourselves.
Sure.
So if you like flowers, get yourself flowers. If you like to go out to dinner, to fancy dinners, don't wait for somebody to take you there. Take yourself there.
Yeah.
Treat yourself to things so that other people can recognize what you value, and then they can help give that to you. So it's a matter of knowing yourself, getting very clear, like you said, with yourself before you can attract the right person to you.
Absolutely. And so that's where that journaling is fundamentally key. And there are books out there that have lots of different prompts. There's a really great product that I actually really love by Switch Research, which is a Canadian company that's in conjunction with the University of British Columbia. And they've got a self-love journal. It's a 90-day journal. Every day has a prompt. And I am really excited to say that I'm partnering with them, and we're putting out a trauma journal, and hopefully it'll be out by December, but we can chat about that another time. But their self-love journal is exactly that, every day. And they're not hard prompts. They're directive. It doesn't take a lot of time. So there's so many really good products like that out there. So if journaling is hard, find something that either looks pretty and it feels good to you, or it's got the right focus. There's another journal called a Turtle Journal. It's a different kind of a company. You can find it on Amazon, and it's on one side of it is what's my goal for the day, what's my big dream, what's my self-care piece, and then it's got some very small prompts, and then it has your daily calendar. So there's all different ways that people can get into journaling that helps that process piece you talked about earlier.
And a lot of times you don't even need a fancy journal. I know that when I buy my daughter all those notebooks for school every year, I go and stack up on those 25-cent notebooks that are on sale. And those can be my journals because they're spiral bound, they're easy to write, they're easy to flip, even though I have my own journal that's available for people. But I use my journal, but at the same time, I also use these cheap little notebooks.
Well,
It doesn't have to be fancy.
right. So, sometimes I just have like, here's my to-do list in my notes. Sometimes that becomes my journal for the day. I just, in my notes section, and something's on my mind, or I had a difficult interaction with somebody. I know with my own, history of trauma, and my background with PTSD, being triggered is difficult, and knowing what those triggers are. And so sometimes just being able to write it down, and it's like, okay, now I'm done. I can let it go and move on with the day, not let go of the trauma piece, let go of what was making me anxious in that moment. So I have all sorts of sticky notes and notepads and things to write stuff down in the moment, because it helps me get it out. And if I can get it out and I can take a couple of deep breaths, it'll help that anxiety start to calm down a little bit. And it's so important for people.
Well, a lot of people don't like to write, so I always also say just do a video. Just record yourself. You can delete it afterwards; it doesn't matter. Record yourself, just saying everything you're thinking. Go off. The thing with the journal is we're not filtered. We can write about whatever. And on video, we want to be very careful about what we say. But if you can be in a private place and you can just go off, maybe on your commute, just turn on your phone and just go off and scream and get it all out of you. That's another way to do it. But I know that a lot of people might not necessarily be ready for the therapy part. Are there some really good books that you recommend for people to get started as far as just having a more insight and awareness about what's going on with them, and then how they can help themselves? Because bibliotherapy is not going anywhere. It's really beneficial and helpful as far as a first step of working on ourselves and growing.
Yeah, Amazon is actually by far, one of the best resources, because you type in any kind of, you name it, workbook, and you will get one. And so anything, or Audible, Kindle, there are so many books on mindfulness, anxiety, toxic relationships, gaslighting, you name it. Attracting the people that you want in your life. So there's a lot of great stuff out there. And I'm happy to share my book list with you for your listeners as well. I have a pretty extensive one right now. The ones that I really like is Dr. Vanderkolk, who wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score, but it is intense. So it is not it is not a lighthearted read. I tell clients or people to just listen to it, listen to 20 minutes of it at a time, because it's pretty heavy. It is very good. And it's all about how we hold on to that emotionally, physically, spiritually. And it has this whole kind of approach, a mindfulness, to work with more mindfulness and that self-help, as John Kabat-Zinn has really great books. Catastrophic Living is one of his. That's a fantastic one. I like Matthew McKay's products. He has stuff, everything from very skills-based DBT, CBT workbook stuff to a self-esteem. He has a wonderful self-esteem planner. So every week is something different. And it's, I think, a 52-week. So there's really great stuff out there. One of my favorite things to do is open up. I have an Audibles account and a podcast account, and I open stuff up and I type in, okay, what's on anxiety today? And just TED Talks and whatever I can find and what I feel like I'm in the mood for. So, being creative out there, but again, books, there's a lot of good stuff. And then read people's reviews. That's how I choose the books, is I read the reviews and see what people said about it. And then, see what you come up with.
Two books that I really like, and I've referred so many people to Dr. Carol McBride that I should be getting some kind of commission back, but she probably doesn't even know I'm doing this. But her two books, Will I Ever Be Good Enough? Being raised by narcissistic parents, and then Will I Ever Be Free of You? Getting Out of a Narcissistic Relationship. Two very powerful books. I highly recommend that for people that are in this situation, because it really helps you understand what's going on and give language, I guess, to your experience. So those are two books, and then I can share your information as well with everybody if you can send me that list. Besides everything you just shared, I think those are all really good books to start with, I guess.
And they have right now, there's some really, really cool products. If you're not a reader, I have a lot of clients that they, don't give me any homework and don't give me any reading. It's like, okay, like you said, movies are great because we identify and we see ourselves in characters and we see our experiences. And so, movies are wonderful. That's one idea. There's also things like, there's skills-based cards. So there's like, you can get DBT cards, you can get self-love cards, you can get where you look through the deck of cards and you pick a different affirmation for the day. So there's so many things out there that are geared for wellness. And so let's get out of this idea of mental illness, trauma's mental illness, anxiety's mental illness, and this idea of I have anxiety and I also have a wellness practice, and so there's a lot of stuff out there. And like you said, finding the mental health clinician that works for you. Interview your people when you call up. What do you work with? Who's your specialty? How do you practice? If somebody says, well, I do, and I'll just laugh at myself because I wanted to be a dance-based therapist when I first started studying and realized that those were not my people as a dancer. And yeah, it was not my thing. So if I called a therapist and said, hey, I'm looking for somebody who works with other psychologists, who, works with trauma, I've done EMDR, I've done all of these other things, what do you do? And they're like, well, I do this, somatic dance-based practice. That would not be the right person for me. So you can interview based on what they do and who they work with and how they work, or have a conversation, like you said, right? Have a conversation. And in 5 minutes, if you feel comfortable and you feel like this is somebody that could help me, then that's probably a good fit. And try it for 2 or 3 sessions. I always joke and say, try it 2 or 3 sessions. If I am not the right person, you are not hurting my feelings, I will send you to somebody great. Right?
We're not going to be a good match for everyone.
Yeah. No, and we can't work with everybody. And so being able to, as the listener, when you're looking for someone, being able to screen that out, I appreciate you saying I have impressive credentials. That doesn't mean we're going to click. I am directive, and I work with some very intense personalities, and I am an intense person. That doesn't work for everybody. My personality, my sarcasm, my humor does not work for everyone. And I would not be a good therapist, for somebody who is, it doesn't like that kind of personality type. And so I think those are really important things. It's not just credentials. And so when we're looking at relationships and choosing people, think about that too. Apply that to choosing a relationship, right? Like, I can have somebody who's got 10 to college degrees, and that's of importance to me. Education is important to me, but it could be that the love of my life never went to college and is the sweetest person and is caring and giving and stable and right? So getting out of our own way as women, we want to make it difficult, and it doesn't always have to be.
Right. Right. And there are some people that are drawn to me because I don't focus, that I'm very holistic and I focus on nutrition and whole body wellness. And there's some people that are like, I don't like that. Like you said, that's too much homework. That's too much for me to do. Just give me a pill and call it a day. Right. And I was like, then I'm not that person for you. And that's fine. We don't take, that's what people don't understand is we're trained not to take that personally. We know we're not going to be a good match for everyone. And so if you try us for 2 to 3 days or us or whoever, 2 to 3 sessions, and you're like, you know what, it's just not a good fit. Maybe you guys can work it out. Maybe you want to go find somebody else. And you keep trying until you find the right fit.
Yep. Yeah. And so relationships are the same, right? And so it's a good place to end because, relationships are the same. don't stick with it if it doesn't feel good. Like,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Just keep moving. And if somebody rejects you for whatever reason, don't take that personally. They're doing you a favor. And so move on and go on to the next person. And that was a really good way, like you said, to bring it all back together. So where can people find you and connect with you if they want to either work with you or reach out to you in some way?
Oh yeah. And I mean, I have an amazing staff. I'm very blessed. I have a great team. And so, send us an email. You can find me. It's my name. So if you take a screenshot right now, it's Joelle at joellerabo.com. You can find us, again, my name, Joelle Rabo Maletis, and Associates is all of our socials, but we're on every platform. And we just love getting emails and talking to people, and I'm happy to refer you on. We're licensed in California, Texas, Montana, and then we're working on about 4 other states, and then we have offices on the East Coast, and I do some coaching as well. So reach out to me, and if I'm not the right person or I can't answer your question, I will send you on to the one that can. So, and thanks again for having me. It's always a pleasure talking with you. It's so much fun. I feel like we could just keep going and going, and
we could, and trauma is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm so glad that I found you. I really appreciate you coming back and talking to me again. And hopefully we'll do this again. Who knows? There's so many areas we could definitely tackle. So
absolutely. It sounds great. And thanks for the opportunity.
I hope this conversation with Joelle was beneficial for you or someone you know that may have experienced a traumatic or toxic relationship. Self-care is very important for those exposed to trauma. I've created a free self-care guide to help you get started with taking better care of yourself. To download your free guide and learn more about Joelle, visit transforminganxiety.com/42. When you're there, go ahead and leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts about this episode. If you haven't already, you can show support for the Mental Health Break podcast by subscribing wherever you're tuning in from today. Also, if you're enjoying the Mental Health Break podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, since that'll make it easier for others to find the podcast. I can't wait to see you here next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.